It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome into another Locked On NFL Sunday, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You've got myself, Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, joined as always by Cody Roark, host of Locked On Broncos, and we are here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, and Twitch, everywhere to give you what you need on a Sunday morning to get you ready for this weekend of NFL action. Let me start off this morning by asking you, Cody, first and foremost, man, how you feeling, buddy?
I'm good, man. We are in week 8 of the National Football League and week 8 of Locked On NFL Sunday, folks. Your team every day. You get the local experts on the biggest stories surrounding their teams leading up to kickoff, and we get to break it down all here. So, Ross, I am great, my friend. Very happy to join you here today.
Yeah, man. Very same. Always a pleasure to be here with you every week. And every week, we're also joined by a few of the local experts from around the Locked On Podcast Network as well. So this morning, we're going to be welcoming in Patricia Traina, who's going to give us some updates on the New York Giants as they get ready for their Monday Night Football action against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll be hosting them in the Meadowlands. Then we're also going to get Kyle Krabs in, host of Locked On Dolphins, because you know we have got to talk about Tua time. It's Tua time, everybody. Tua Tagovailoa getting his first start in Miami, and then they're going to be taking on the Los Angeles Rams, and then we're going to wrap it up today. Our final guest, Jeff Lloyd of the Locked On Browns podcast, 5-2 those Browns, but still third in the division. It's wild. So excited to talk with Jeff to give us some updates. They have to play today without Odell Beckham Jr. and through the rest of the season without Odell Beckham Jr. Could it be Hollywood Higgins, the guy that steps up in his place, had 110 receiving yards last week against the Bengals? So we'll talk more about that situation and about the Browns, all told, with Jeff. Before we get there, it's the trade deadline. We're coming up on the trade deadline on Tuesday, November 3rd. Amongst other things, don't forget to vote, by the way. But when it comes down to these trade deadlines, there's a lot of teams already, some of this news leaking out. So I thought it would be fun to kind of go through some of these teams, talk a little bit about where they might be looking to deal, and see if maybe we can surmise a good option for some of these guys. You want to go through that?
I'm always ready for that. Let's talk about it.
Hey, man, trade deadline. We got to get to it. So let's go ahead and go with the Houston Texans. They look to be talking about or interested in trading Brandon Cooks or Kenny Stills, really just that wide receiver room all together. And some teams have acquired about Will Fuller as well. I've heard a little bit about the teams that are interested in Will Fuller. There's one perfect fit that I want to give. But first, how do you feel about the Texans looking at potentially trading any of these wide receivers, including Brandon Cooks, who has just been dealt all around the league so far?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Houston Texans, you look at their cap purgatory that they're going to be facing. I think that's probably a big reason why they're going to start offsetting a lot of players. And I think, there's going to be a lot of players available. And I say Brandon Cooks probably makes the most sense. To me, I look at Will Fuller, and I'm just not – I don't know if they really want to get rid of a guy like that unless they're really invested in Randall Cobb. Right. These are the things that I'm looking at, too, with Houston. You have Deshaun Watson, who you extended. You want to keep him around in the fold for a long time. But guess what? You can't help Deshaun Watson out if he has no weapons. They already got rid of one of his best ones, DeAndre Hopkins. So I think it's either you got to decide between Will Fuller or even Brandon Cooks. And I think Brandon Cooks has started to come into his own as of late throughout the season. I think the overall just consistency, and it goes back, I think, a little bit to the depth, and we could get into this a little bit later, but the depth of the drop back that Deshaun Watson normally takes, he's dropping back 9 to 10 yards on average depth. Of course, that's why he gets sacked so many times. That's why the passing concepts are not open underneath. And so there's areas of his game he has to improve, but if you take his weapons away, I think it's going to be even worse.
I think that's a really interesting thing, though. I do want to talk a little bit about that because, and I'm going to ask you a question too. Like when it comes to that deep drop back, is the intent to allow those longer developing pass patterns and route concepts to develop? But doesn't that also make him too late for the underneath routes at the same time?
Yeah, so typically when you do, a one-step drop back, it's quick, one-step throw. If you do a three-step, it's 1, 2, 3, scan, throw. If you do a 5-step drop back, it's usually to allow those deeper routes, the longer routes downfield to develop. Well, if you're dropping back normally, even with short crossing patterns on 9 to 10 yards average depth, dropping back there, sometimes even 12, you are essentially taking yourself out of the play where your average air yards target is going to increase overall. I know that's a metric the NFL uses, but the dilemma that you run into there is that you allow defensive backs to cover a lot more. Now, most defensive teams against a team like Deshaun Watson, I would play my outside linebackers if I ran a 3-4 scheme. I would play them in wide nines, and I would play my two interior defensive linemen in double 3 techniques, and then I would have my inside linebackers drop to soft spots. We see Deshaun Watson try to step up in the pocket, maneuver underneath, but teams are being disciplined and not getting too far upfield, not allowing him to dip under. So now he's finding himself in situations where he's setting himself up to be sacked, and he's also setting himself up to throw interceptions. So it's crazy, man. The game of football.
I love it. And just some terminology there, wide 9, that would be the defensive end lining up outside of where the tight end is, so on the outside shoulder of the tight end. And then double 3 tech would be putting both of your defensive tackles in between, essentially the gaps between the guard and the tackle. So that's a pass rush stance right there the whole way through. That one tech that's going in between your center and guard, that's all about run, stop, and plug in the middle. But if you've got those penetrating 3 techs lined up in that 3 gap or in that B gap, then all of a sudden you have a big test for a deep drop back like that. So it is wild. And then you're considering trading away some of these weapons. But I have to say the fit that I think is just absolutely perfect around the NFL is if the Green Bay Packers could somehow get a hold of Will Fuller. I think that's lights out right there. I think that is a fantastic fit for that team and to get him involved in that passing game.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of circulation right now about the Green Bay Packers in the NFL, about them trying to acquire a wide receiver, and what a better opportunity to get a guy like Brandon Cooks or Will Fuller, maybe even reunite Randall Cobb with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I don't know, but these are the things I think when I look at the Packers, they're a tough team. I think the game against Tampa Bay kind of humbled them a little bit, but for some reason, we talked about earlier, Ross, this season, that when Devontae Adams was out for this Packers football team, we're like, they don't have many weapons. All of a sudden, these guys show up. Lazard, Valdez-Scantling shows up, and all of a sudden, it's like, is the narrative about Aaron Rodgers not having weapons, is that actually overplayed? But then you surround him with more talent. Look, he's going to be even better, and it's a great compliment opposite of Devontae Adams. So I think that Green Bay and Houston might actually be the most realistic trade partners that you had mentioned.
Yeah, every good team focuses on somehow getting better. That's what every good team does, and Green Bay being right up there. Another wide receiver, a couple other wide receivers names that are on the market. Philadelphia apparently potentially interested in trading, or would at least hear offers for Alshon Jeffrey. And in the Bengals with John Ross went public about his trade request. I think that one, the writing is just on the wall. It's just about finding the right partner for him.
Yeah. John Ross. I mean, we all talk about it. He's got talent. He's got football speed. He's got to establish a little bit more in his route development, because he was known coming out of college as just the 9-ball guy. He's just the guy that runs deep, and he's had struggles with drops throughout his career. These are areas he has to improve on. But there were rumors, and one of the tweets, it was actually deleted by the reporter, but it's the one that John Ross had quoted saying that it's not that I don't love football, it's being around the people here. Like, the people here don't love it, and so it's like, whose side do you really choose? Because it's all about leverage in the NFL. The business side, it's all about who has the leverage. And I would say that right now it's about 50-50 between Cincinnati and John Ross. But intriguing to see a fit maybe where he would go. For me, I would look at him being one of those guys that probably goes to a team that needs a downfield threat, like the Philadelphia Eagles. They've struggled. Now Deshaun Jackson's out even longer after just coming back from an injury, and then Alshon Jeffrey really hasn't played too much this season, so they could be offsetting that. I know the Philadelphia Eagles, they called the Denver Broncos to inquire about wide receiver Deshaun Hamilton. Talks didn't really go anywhere, according to our good friend Benjamin Albright. So, they're looking for wide receiver help, and it could be maybe John Ross is the guy that's going to fix their troubles. Then again, you can't fix that offensive line.
Can't fix that offensive line, not with a wide receiver. You can go ahead and get all those deep threats you want. If you can't give your quarterback time, it's not going to make a difference. I see we have a couple of Whodats in the chat and everything as well. So I do want to make sure that since we're talking about wide receiver news, Ian Rappaport clarifying what everyone already knew, which is that the New Orleans Saints were not interested in moving Michael Thomas. So thankfully we can finally put that rumor to bed. And
can't trade Mike.
They can't trade Mike. That's exactly right. And then another big one, we have a couple of other ones that we're going to get to, but thankfully they're connected to the host we're going to be talking to today. But there's one big one that I want to talk about real quick, and that's the Minnesota Vikings, who I think you've got some further clarification on this, but also the Vikings interested in at least potentially taking trade offers for Anthony Harris, anybody that's willing to take on the remainder of that franchise tag salary. So that's a big safety that could be on the market here as well.
Yeah, teams right now, they're looking for cornerbacks, they're looking for safeties, and you're seeing guys too, and Benjamin Albright, we do a show on PFN Weekly, Pro Football Network Weekly, we were talking about this. You've got NFL teams that are calling practice squad stashaways to the 53-man roster from other teams because teams are desperately hurting at that position right now. And who would have thought, too, cornerback right now would be such a high-demand position. The same thing with safety, too. One safety goes down, all of a sudden it can change the element of a defense. When I look at Minnesota, I mean, their defense is struggling massively this year, even with Smith and Harrison Smith on that back end. They are struggling all across the board. So to me, maybe they are trying to offset that a little bit. A lot of players are available for the Minnesota Vikings. Adam Thielen is not one of them, contrary to some of the narratives that have been pumped out this week on social media. But outside of that, Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen, those guys are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. But the defensive side of the ball, there are a lot of guys that are available for the offering.
Yeah. I know I've heard some chatter about Harrison Smith as well. So the other the other safety, I'm switching over to basketball for some reason. The other safety that could potentially be available. So lots going on in that market. The final one that I'll bring up, Atlanta Falcons potentially interested in trading Takk McKinley. This is something that has been sort of another piece of just kind of writing on the wall for a while. These two player and team organization have not been on the same page really since he was, maybe the second year of his first round draft status. So not a big surprise to hear this name.
No, it's not. For them, they're coming off of that victory against the Carolina Panthers, surprisingly enough, on Thursday Night Football. Right. And at the outside back position, defensively, they feel like they're just trying to make some changes. I mean, obviously, they got rid of the head coach. They got rid of the general manager. They're trying to go through some culture changes there. Contrary to popular belief, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones are not available for the taking. And that's cap hell for any team that wants to take that on. So that's not going to happen, though. So Atlanta's in a position where I think they're going to start rebuilding here soon. Yeah. But even the rebuild doesn't mean that they're going to get rid of their top guys. But guys like Takk McKinley, guys that they really haven't contributed to the extent that they were hoping for, it's going to be easy for them to move on. And there's also going to be a team out there that maybe doesn't have that type of productivity or the potential at that position, and they may take a chance on a guy like McKinley.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first round upside, you're going to get people that are going to be interested. And speaking of first round upside, we've got a lot of quarterbacks out on the, that are working on their youth, their young development, all that's been going on, and none that have been in the news, maybe more, or perhaps I'll even say more impressive in some circumstances than one Daniel Jones. So I'm glad to bring in our good friend and host of the Locked On Giants podcast, Patricia Traina. You can follow on Twitter at Patricia_Traina. Patricia, thank you so much for taking the time to come through with us today, taking a break from your busy schedule over at Sports Illustrated and Locked On Giants.
Always a pleasure, guys. How are you?
Very, very well. Very well. Thank you very much for asking. Cody, how are you doing?
I'm good. Patricia, always great to see you. Doing a great job with your Giants coverage down there, Sports Illustrated and the Locked On Giants podcast, your team every day. So if you're a Giants fan, you're tuning in right now. If you're not listening to Patricia Traina.
I like Patrina.
That's a
pretty good nickname.
I trained a handle on Twitter for mailbag questions.
I love it. But if you're not listening to Locked On Giants, hosted by Patricia, you are missing out. She's got a lot of great insights to what's going on down there with the New York Giants as they're really trying to overcome a lot of these storylines this season, Patricia. And one of the biggest things, too, I remember I was watching a Thursday Night Football game, Giants versus Eagles, and it was late in that fourth quarter, and I saw your tweet because it almost sounded like you were expecting it to happen. The Philadelphia Eagles sack Daniel Jones. He fumbles the ball. They pick it up, and it was off. So what's really been the storyline here for this Giants team outside obviously losing Saquon Barkley? What has been your biggest takeaway so far leading up to now with this Giants development of Daniel Jones?
Well, I think the problem with this whole thing is that the Giants don't have an identity yet. They're still searching for an identity on offense. They're searching for one on defense. New coaching staff, an unusual, off season for everybody, not just the Giants, obviously. But when you have a new coaching staff, new personnel, new everything, it becomes a little more difficult. And we see that across the league, with some other teams. I know Dallas is having their struggles. Washington's having struggles. So just with Daniel Jones, we still don't know what kind of quarterback he's going to be. We see a lot of the same mistakes that he's making, that he made last year, most notably taking too long to get rid of the ball, taking too long to process what he's seeing, just little things that are just, at this point you would say to yourself, he should be a little further along where he is now. Now, how much of that is a result of the new offense that he had to learn? I can't say for sure. I don't think, anybody will admit to that, but I'm sure that plays a part of it.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. And, look, one of the things that's really interesting to watch with the Giants is, of course, the young quarterback, Daniel Jones, and everything that's been pushing forward with him and just the commitment that this organization has had with him. Look across other places in the NFL. You look at Washington within your own division, within the Giants' own division. You look at Chicago. See a lot of teams that are trying to grasp for who's going to be the future at quarterback. How solid do you feel like the Giants are in Daniel Jones, and where does that confidence come from?
You know what, Ross? I think the jury is still out on him. They've said in the beginning of the year, they being Dave Gettleman, they being John Mara, Joe Judge, that they have all the confidence in the world in Daniel Jones. Now, how much are they missing? Because, he doesn't have a stable offensive line in front of him. He doesn't have Saquon Barkley, as you guys mentioned before. He really doesn't have a number one receiver. And then who knows what's going on with it. Evan Ingram, who was supposed to be, a big playmaker for them. He hasn't been unleashed yet and been able to uncork it. So I don't know that you can really say, Daniel Jones is definitely the guy or he's not the guy, given these other circumstances. It's just really tricky because, the quarterback can't do it all by themselves. They need a good supporting cast. And I don't think you can say the Giants have shown thus far that they have a good supporting cast.
Makes sense.
I would even make the argument when I watched New York last season when Pat Shurmur was the head coach there, even the amount of wide receivers that they went through due to injuries. I mean, it almost feels like a similar story right now with the supporting cast. You can only gain chemistry with so many different guys when you have call-ups. And then also we've heard some rumors too, potentially about Darius Slayton maybe being available. Is there any kind of news you can offer us on that, whether or not that's true or not?
Darius Slayton in a trade? I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I don't know where that might have come from. Golden Tate, maybe. Yeah, I mean, that I could see happening. But Darius Slayton, no, I haven't heard that.
That's good.
With that, too, I'll even go there, too, with Golden Tate. He's been a big part of this offense for a couple of years now. But now, it's at a crossroads where do you feel like the New York Giants are in a position where they're saying, hey, we need to invest on trying to build the right way instead of just trying to bring these guys in? What type of value do you think that they could get for a guy like Golden Tate at this point? Because he has bounced around from a couple teams in the last few years.
Yeah, I think if they get anything for him, it's going to be a day 3 type of pick. The Giants, they don't have a 7th because they traded that to Denver for Isaac Yiadom. They got back a 6 when they traded away Marcus Golden to the Cardinals. They don't have any comp picks on the horizon. So if you're Dave Gettleman or whoever the general manager is going to be next year, ideally you want to make sure you have at least your full range of draft picks, because if you start trading away guys and you don't have all those assets, you're not going to help yourself. This is a team that needs some additional talent. They're not one player or 2 players away from making a run.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you get those draft picks so you can continue to build through the youth, through the draft. But then, I mean, those day 3 picks in the offseason tend to skyrocket in value for other teams. You could bring in some of those other vets that maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable with. And maybe some of that comes from Joe Judge as well. Patricia, you did us the great graces in favor of coming on over at Locked On NFL, which we do every Monday through Friday when we're doing our NFC East preview. And we talked a little bit about Joe Judge and his style, which was making a lot of news at that time. What can you tell us so far about the relationship between Joe Judge and the players and how, has that been symbiotic? How is that working out so far?
Well, so far so good. I mean, here we are. We're 7 games in. We're going into week 8 now for the Giants, and he hasn't lost his team. The games have been mostly close, which says a lot. Nobody's giving up. Nobody's hanging their heads. I've made this comparison before. You look at what's going on over with the Jets. And the body language of their players sitting on the bench, when things get out of control. You don't see that with the Giants. You see guys who are still fighting, who are still, doing whatever they can to help the cause. Now, a play here or play there, and they come up short. But I think I saw a statistic in 4 of their losses, the Giants have lost by 1 score or less, which means they're keeping it close. Yeah. And that's a testament to Joe Judge keeping these guys bought into the program and motivated and just being able to reach them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would say that's important too, Patricia, because in my realm too, my experience as a coach being around the game is anytime you have a new coach coming in, you have to undergo a culture change, because the way that you did things the year prior, it's not going to work with the new foundation here. And I think Joe Judge has gotten a lot of slack just by some of the things he did, some of the unorthodox practices, like, for example, forcing them to practice on a grass field when they play on the turf and in rainy conditions where it's wet. But the idea of that is it'll prepare the football team for if they ever have to face that situation, they will be ready, which I like that. I think it's very proactive. I think people have to give Joe Judge more time. And I think for the most part, as you mentioned, with some of the close losses, it's not like they're being uncompetitive. They're not competing. They are there. I mean, we even saw Daniel Jones break out an 80-yard run there. I mean, that right there was crazy. But outside of that, they are competing, and they have the identity to eventually become a strong football team. And the way that the NFC East is kind of figured right now, I think they have a chance to maybe, if they can piece together some wins, they might be able to come up and sneak some traction in that division. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, I call it the NFC least. I'm not doing that to be mean. It's just you look at the results so far, and it's almost a shame that somebody from the division has to get a playoff spot, because that means that a team elsewhere is going to be deprived of a playoff spot that's probably going to have a better record at the rate this division is going. So it's really not fair, but yeah, I mean, it is still competitive. I mean, the Giants technically are not out of anything. If they can somehow string together some wins, they can get right back in it.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun to continue to watch this team and see how everything develops over this last sort of half of the season, if you will. But the best place to keep up to date with all of it is over at Locked On Giants every Monday through Friday with Patricia. Patricia, we thank you so much for checking in with us and for being here this morning. Enjoy a bit of a stress-free Sunday before the Monday night action against Tampa Bay.
Thanks so much.
You take care.
You too, guys.
Patricia is awesome. I love Patricia.
Oh, yeah.
She does a great job. And if you're a Giants fan, like I said, if you're not listening to Locked On Giants hosted by Patricia Traina, you are missing out.
What are you doing?
A phenomenal job. Seriously.
What are you doing?
But if you're here, now we have you on the right track to be able to get over there. So that's going to be a tough matchup, Ross. On Monday Night Football, you look at Tampa Bay, just how good they've been defensively, offensively. It's like Tom Brady has overtaken the Bruce Arians system and has made it his own. I mean, it is Tom Brady's system now that they are running. And we always thought that Bruce Arians is going to make Tom Brady conform to his system. That's not the case. It is Tom Brady's system that we are seeing right now in Tampa Bay, and they're getting stronger. And the fact that they just added Antonio Brown now, it's crazy when you factor that in. Chris Godwin had the finger surgery, so now you factor in Mike Evans. You have a guy like Antonio Brown, and just the weapons that they have. Gronkowski's getting more involved now.
He's getting a little bit more comfortable.
I tell you what, Ross, Tampa Bay is becoming a little bit scary. They're becoming, I think, the team that we maybe thought they could be on paper early on in the offseason.
Absolutely, yeah. They've been outstanding so far. And, look, they're going to be a lot of fun to watch on Monday Night Football. It'll be good to see how they end up capitalizing on the matchup here that they're going to have with New York in order to keep themselves rolling. They have a divisional matchup week 9 as well against the New Orleans Saints. That's going to come up right after that. And, that's potentially when Antonio Brown is going to be at least eligible to play. We'll see if he's ready to play, right? That'll be a bit of a different conversation. But certainly if they're going to be down Chris Godwin for any amount of time, I guess it's not so bad to have Antonio Brown as the next guy up for you.
No, it's not. And, if he can get to a place where the off the field stuff can kind of go away, if he can get some of that stuff all cleared out and not be a distraction to the organization, I think that it's gonna work out, because we see when Antonio Brown is healthy and he's in a good mindset and he's on that football field, he's one of the best there is. He's very tough to cover. He's a nightmare. Luckily, Denver's already played Tampa Bay, so they don't have to worry about that.
You don't have to worry about that one anymore.
But Ross, your Saints, they have to play him one more time.
Yeah, they got the one more. They got the matchup with them next week, man. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll certainly be talking about that one a bunch, because I think that's going to be a pretty big matchup. And of course, it's a Sunday Night Football matchup next week as well. So one game that should be the Sunday Night Football matchup this week is the Miami Dolphins, who are going to be hosting the Los Angeles Rams. They're going to be looking at their first start for Tua Tagovailoa, who's going to be coming in. They made the announcement that he's going to be the starter moving forward over Ryan Fitzpatrick. And to help us talk through it, we're going to welcome in Kyle Krabs. We might have a little bit of choppiness going on here, but look at him. He's ready to go for this game. He's in the garb. Look at him. Kyle, how are you, man? Thank you very much for joining us.
What's going on, guys? Geez, if the audio's not great, but we're making do here at Hard Rock Stadium. Excited for the day of Tua Tagovailoa as the starting quarterback. And of course, this Adam Schefter, Cody, your doppelganger, Adam Schefter, dropped a little bit of a a nugget on Dolphins this morning that they didn't really seem to appreciate all too much. Perhaps this is just as much about exactly what they've got.
Yeah, that to me I think is very crazy when you think about it, because Tua in this type of season that we have seen so far in the National Football League, is he going to be able to step into the mix against an Aaron Donald-led Rams, and is he going to be able to be what we think he could be? And is he going to is the amount of games, is 10 games enough for him to really demonstrate that he is the guy? I don't feel like that. You know, I feel like I get where Houston is at. You're going to get great draft capital altogether. But I worry about the fact that if they give up to him, like if he struggles in 10 games, if they give up on him early, that to me is going to be a worry that I have.
I really think the dynamic here, it's a two-sided coin, because if Tua completely flops, then, or if he gets hurt again, right, with the durability questions that he has, I think that's one area where you justify, okay, he got us a top 3 pick. We need to ask ourselves some hard questions. If he shows flashes, I don't think you're going to justify anything, and if he thrives, you're going to have an opportunity to look at, okay, what kind of players do you really need to optimize building around Tua? So I think there's a couple different layers here to this NFL draft evaluation piece that Adam Schefter dropped this morning that shouldn't just be taken as a slap in the face of Tua.
Right. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of excitement, of course, it's generating around Tua getting started. But I want to talk a little bit about the weapons that he has available around him right now. Where do you feel like he might have some of the best connections in terms of his practice experience? The guys that he's gotten to sort of already get in reps with, who are you looking at as the potential guy that he, or set of guys that he might lean on as he sort of gets his rhythm and gets his feet under him here in the NFL?
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, especially this week, with the presence of Jalen Ramsey and his ability to shadow their best receiver in Devontae Parker. So I got fantasy folks. Do I start Devontae this week? Don't ask me, because whatever I tell you, the opposite's going to happen. So I expect you'll see plenty of chemistry with the backs. They have a lot of rotation with the backs in the passing game. I think there's a lot of room for Matt Breida to get a bigger market share. They're kind of the de facto RB2 anyway. I think with the tight end room, especially against a Rams team that's missing 2 really good safety rookies this week, you could see Mike Gesicki, Adam Shaheen, if he dresses. I think the inactives just came out and he was questionable, and Durham Smythe, that middle of the field for him, which was an area that he did well with at Alabama. I think look at the regions of the field, and whoever's running those routes, those are going to be the guys that really click with him early on.
That's great.
Taking a look real quick, one thing I'm going to ask you about the defensive side of the ball. We've seen Brian Flores trying to transform this culture in Miami. They've been competitive. They've been aggressive. We've seen them sneak up on teams like San Francisco this year. What is your biggest key, I think, against this Rams offense that you think the Miami Dolphins defense has to come out and they have to accomplish today?
Yeah, I think they need to Xerox a lot of the game plan against San Francisco for countering the run attack. I think Miami did a really nice job outside of 130-something yard run by Raheem Mostert in week 5 against San Francisco to bottle that up. And I think they need to control the line of scrimmage. They're a gap control team, so stay in the gaps, string them out, force them to cut back into team pursuit. Don't give up soft edges. And they did a nice job with that against San Francisco. I think that copying that blueprint in a lot of ways will be very relevant to face Sean McVay's zone rushing offense.
That's great. One other thing for you over on the defensive side, the trade deadline is coming up. Miami seems to come out and align with the idea that Xavier Howard isn't going anywhere. It would take a quote-unquote Laramie Tunsil type trade in order to move on from him. How important is he to this defense, and which really strings together why they want to keep him around?
Yeah, I think that this was the whole vision of the identity of the defense, was having a pair of lockdown corners that they could pair together with Byron Jones. Howard. Everybody's got a price, right? So somebody's going to give you a Laramie Tunsil size package for Xavier Howard. Like, yeah, they just drafted Igbenogany at 30 overall. We'd make do and we pivot because you're going to get another treasure trove. And as you see with this Houston situation, these picks look really, really good now. So I don't even think just a one would do it for Xavier Howard, because you think about the financials. If that was a record-setting contract last summer, and now you've already got all these new corner contracts that are out. He's on a deal right now that's paying me. I think he's the 7th or 8th highest paid corner, and he's one of the best in the NFL when he's healthy of generation turnovers.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value there, and any playoff hungry team would probably jump at the opportunity to just give a one. And I think the Dolphins would be smart to say, you got to double down on that at least to get us to the table.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. I'm a defensive back guy, so if I had an opportunity to take a chance, if I was a GM, to get a guy like Xavier Howard on my team, if I was a team that was struggling with cornerback play, as we've seen, there's many teams right now in the NFL. Ross and I were just talking about it right now that are hurting at the cornerback position. I think it'd be a little bit, it'd be too hard to resist at this point, especially if you get the gamble overhaul that you're talking about in terms of draft capital. I'd jump on that as well. Miami's been very fruitful in the draft the last couple of years, so and they're going to be fruitful this year too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it puts them in a good position. We got one more thing before we get you out of here, Kyle. And I know you're at Hard Rock, so we appreciate you taking the time to join us. Make sure y'all check Kyle out on Twitter at Grinding the Tape. You can check him out over at the Draft Network, and of course, every Monday through Friday over at Locked On Dolphins. You can follow at Locked On Fins as well, PHINS. But real quick, we put out a poll last night about Tua's first start coming up against the Rams, and we asked the people, all the good people, how many total yards they thought Tua would put together in his first start against the Rams. And we gave them four options: less than 150 yards, between 150 to 250, between 250 to 350, and then 350 plus. 68% say between 150 to 250, but there are some daring people out there. 4% going with 350 or more. Where do you align yourself on this? Less than 150, between 150 and 250, between 250 to 350, or 350 up?
I think 150 to 250 is the safe, sensible approach to this bet. I would lean into that one, but I could see a path to 275, maybe 300, especially with the way the rookie quarterbacks around, showing that if you played at a high level in college, there's a good chance you come in and play at a fairly high level.
I love it.
I'll stick with 150 to 250.
I love it. And that was 68% that were right there. So, we've got some sensible people on the timeline. That's what that means. We appreciate you coming through, Kyle. Thanks so much for taking the time. Enjoy the action today. Both Cody and I agree this should be the primetime game tonight.
Right on. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I wouldn't mind getting out of the South Florida heat a little bit wearing this mask in here in a couple minutes, but that's okay.
Yeah, I believe it.
Stay safe, Kyle.
Appreciate you, bud.
Kyle does a good job with Locked On Dolphins. I remember Travis Wingfield was doing the Locked On Dolphins podcast, and now he's with the Miami Dolphins. And so a great stepping stool, too. I mean, Kyle does a great job, especially with the Draft Network as well. So a lot of great work if you are a Dolphins fan to check out Kyle's work there. Like I said, I mean, this is a game, too. And I think that, Ross, that poll that you put out, I'd say is going to test the validity maybe of the way that people think. Do they get caught up in the hype narrative, or can they put on their realistic glasses? I think 68%, that's probably the most realistic place. I voted that as well. So also, listeners of the show, every Sunday, we're going to have specific polls for you here, Locked On NFL Sunday, that we're going to get you involved. We're going to get your answers, your feedback, and we're going to share it here on the show. So stay tuned for that. We're going to keep things rolling for you guys here. Yeah,
absolutely. I got to tell you real quick, though, I'm going to get caught up in the hype. I'm going 350 plus.
350?
I don't care. I'm going 350. Give me 350 for Tua all day. No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. That 150 to 250 is absolutely the most sensible place for it to be. But, I'm going to buy into the hype a little bit. And, he won't be the first young quarterback whose hype I bought into. There was a young man coming in out of Oklahoma not too long ago, one Baker Mayfield, that I was 100% bought in on. And he really has been looking at least more improved in certain areas so far this year. Had a bit of a down year last year. But you know what? Don't let me talk about it. Let's bring in the local expert for the Cleveland Browns. It's the one, the only Jeff Lloyd, host of the Locked On Browns podcast. Y'all can follow him on Twitter at @locked_LJ_Lloyd, Monday through Friday, every day over at Locked On Browns. Jeff, how are you, buddy?
Might have some technical difficulty. There
might have a little bit going on. Hey, Jeff, can you hear us? Not sure he's able to hear us at the moment. So we'll bring it back around to him. But go ahead.
I was going to say, I wanted to touch on what Baker Mayfield was able to do last week. I mean, he got off to arguably one of the worst starts possible.
Right.
0 for 5. And all of a sudden, then I believe he completed 15 passes in a row. It was 15 for 15 to start the second half. really fueled that comeback. And that throw they had, the game-winning touchdown throw that he had, was an absolute dime. I mean, we talk about Baker Mayfield. I know he gets a lot of national media scrutiny when the Browns, they struggle. But look, they're sitting at 5-2 and arguably the toughest division, minus Cincinnati. They're on the up and up, but arguably in the toughest division with Pittsburgh, the only undefeated team left in the NFL, Baltimore, with the reigning MVP that we talk about, Lamar Jackson, and then Baker Mayfield and this Browns team that's been decimated by injuries. Now they've lost OBJ.
Right.
This is a football team I think is very, very surprising with where they're at, all circumstances considered. And Myles Garrett is absolutely just a wrecking crew right now as a pass rusher. So this is a dangerous Browns football team, and in that division, I think they do have a chance to maybe come out and maybe secure one of those wild card spots. But like I said, it's such a close division that really the Browns are 1.5 games back from the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're only a game back between the Baltimore Ravens. So those two teams are going to play today, and if the Browns can win against the Las Vegas Raiders and one of those teams loses, obviously it's going to bump them up. They could potentially go to second place in the AFC North.
Yeah, it's wild to be a 5-2 team, or even just a 5-win team, because you look around the NFL, there's maybe only one other exception to where a 5-win team is in the second place. And that's really, I mean, that's the Baltimore Ravens. There's one exception over in the NFC as well. But it's just a tough division to be in this year with Pittsburgh and Baltimore. And so they're a 5-win team in the third place of their division, which is kind of wild. But they've continued to win despite, they've got OBJ out now for the rest of the season, so they'll learn if they could do that. But they've already overcome the loss of Nick Chubb for the last few weeks as well. So they have been a team that has shown that they can win under that pressure, under that adversity, and remain resilient.
Yeah, no, and I'd say resiliency is a key. I think they have the right coaching staff in place in Cleveland. I didn't think they had it last year, but now it seems like they got the right guys around. I think Stefanski's doing a great job there with Baker Mayfield and this offense. And once they get Nick Chubb back, I mean, this is going to be a team. When they had Nick Chubb, they were rolling. I mean, they were able to put up as many points as they did against Dallas. Now, granted, Dallas's defense is not that good, but the overall efficiency and the output of the rushing attack between him and Kareem Hunt together, that is dynamic. Then you throw in the play action, the bootleg with Baker Mayfield, the quick passing game. They have weapons, and Hollywood Higgins is going to be one of those guys I think is going to step up for the absence of a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. So obviously, looking at that game, it's going to be a fun game to watch, especially against the Las Vegas Raiders too.
Yeah.
When you look at this football team, they've been one of those teams I feel like has been quietly under the radar. They competed really well. I thought in that first half against Tampa Bay, part of me was thinking, I don't know what's going on there. I was like, I don't know if this is going to be a team that might sneak one out against Tampa Bay, because we saw Nelson Aguilar, of all people. We know all of his history.
Oh, my goodness.
He's going off this season. Henry Ruggs is a big deep play threat. And then you have Hunter Renfrow. Then you also have Darren Waller. I mean, they have so many weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and the running game with Josh Jacobs. That's a tough football team. So this, in my opinion, this game right here might be one of the ones that if you're kind of on the fence about where these two teams are at, I think this might be one of the more entertaining games of the afternoon.
Yeah, this could be the game that answers a lot of questions for either one of these teams, or just generates more questions that needs answers. But, I guess it just depends on who comes out on top in the contest. There's been some trade rumors and everything around the Cleveland Browns as well. They've been dealing with a little bit. You're looking at David Njoku potentially being on the market for them. They have a bit of a surplus at tight end and of course he requested a trade earlier on in the season, but you have a bit of a surplus with Austin Hooper and with Harrison Bryant. So potentially a team that's looking for another big target in their offense, maybe even with a young quarterback. David Njoku could be a good route to go.
Yeah, he really could. And I think one of the biggest things that frustrates me is just as a football observer and as an analyst is just watching David Njoku and envisioning him in this Cleveland Browns offense with Baker Mayfield. When you told me that Jarvis Landry would come to the Cleveland Browns, Odell Beckham Jr. would come to the Cleveland Browns, and then you would get a guy like David Njoku in there as well with Baker Mayfield, I thought to myself that this is an offense on paper that is very, very explosive. We haven't seen that really for David Njoku. He hasn't really had, I think, the ideal fit I think we all envisioned for him. And you know what? Maybe a change of scenery will be good for him and his career. But as you mentioned, there's some teams out there that could use a young tight end that could benefit from that. And maybe Njoku will benefit from having a new change of scenery. How much is he really on the market? I mean, I'm not sure. I know this has been something that was talked about even before the season with David Njoku. So at this point, I think where we're at in the NFL season, I wouldn't be shocked if that's true. Yeah.
Let's see if we can get Jeff back in here. Maybe he can give us a little bit of insight on the David Njoku situation. Once again, Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. Jeff, you able to hear us?
I hear you, boys. How about me?
Hey, 3 and 5. Might be just a little bit of a delay, but that is A-okay. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. You can catch Jeff on Twitter at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd every Monday through Friday over at Locked On Browns. All the great work that he's doing. Jeff, we were just having a little bit of a conversation around Baker Mayfield, and then you also have some of the trade deadline talk that's going on. But I want to start off with you with the big news, which is losing Odell Beckham Jr. Hollywood Higgins looks to be the guy that's going to step up there. Can you give us a little bit of an insight about, this is a team that's already overcome and won despite the loss of Nick Chubb? They found some way to get some production out of the run game regardless. How do they also overcome a loss like OBJ?
Yeah, I think we still have some technical difficulties going on here.
The season, just discussing things, it was like, wow, they're really deep at several positions, skill-wise, whether it's tight end, whether it's running back, wide receiver, it was maybe top-heavy. Higgins is just a special player with Baker Mayfield.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Rashard Higgins gives you this type of out anywhere else.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we're losing him for the day. That stinks. Sorry about that, Jeff. We're just having some trouble with the connection there. But I think that he's right. You heard him sort of allude to the idea of Rashard Higgins being, a special player with Baker Mayfield in particular. And I think that we've seen that so far. 6 catches, 110 yards last week with Baker Mayfield. Again, Bengals last week. And so I think that you can see Rashard Higgins start to step up into the role that they need. He doesn't have to be Odell Beckham Jr. at his best. He just needs to be a good option for Baker Mayfield.
And I think a lot of people too, Ross, get caught up in the hype of, okay, the team loses this player, now they need this player to be that player. I don't think you can always make that comparison in the National Football League. I think these are the issues that you run into when you see the loss of a player and all of a sudden you think to yourself, well, they're not going to have the same production. No, but they might have a different type of production. Hollywood Higgins, let's not forget, folks, when Baker Mayfield was a rookie and he was in the NFL preseason, who was his favorite target in the preseason? It was Hollywood Higgins out of Colorado State. And so they've got tremendous chemistry with one another. Now, it may not be the exact chemistry you're going to get with Odell Beckham Jr., but I think they might have more chemistry. So if you want to look at it in a positive light, I think the chemistry that these guys already have with one another, I feel like they got more chemistry together than Baker Mayfield does with OBJ. And so you can make the argument there, their offense might actually pick up a little bit. So I don't know. I want to be able to look back here in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now and be able to actually take this clip and say, hey, look, we told you here on Locked On NFL Sunday, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes a ton of sense. So let's take a look around the NFL at a couple of these other matchups that are going on before we get to our picks. And then, of course, we'll have our last thoughts, which will be Cody's last thoughts on the Denver Broncos, my last thoughts on the New Orleans Saints. Make sure we some of the hometown as well. But one of the matchups that I think we're both really interested in, because there are some really intriguing matchups in the first sort of slate of games. New England traveling to Buffalo to take on Buffalo at home, -4.5. This looked like this might be a bit of a runaway game for Buffalo, but things have adjusted and changed that a bit.
Yeah, I think the injury to Stephon Gilmore, him not being in this matchup now, obviously dealing with a knee injury, tweaked it at practice, out of this game. Julian Edelman out of this game as well. They lost another defensive player as well. To me, it's kind of concerning with how we've seen New England play. They struggled against the Denver Broncos offensively, and then they also, they just got blasted by the San Francisco 49ers last week. This is a team that was not as remotely competitive as I thought they would be. And their identity as a football team leading up to even before Cam Newton got hurt originally was to run the football.
Right.
And they had a 4-headed rushing attack between not only Cam Newton, James White. Now you talk about Damian Harris, and you also have in Rex Burkhead. Well, now it's kind of been different. Teams have been thinking, okay, hey, look, this is a team that loves to run the football. If we could shut that down, we want to force Cam Newton to throw the football, which we don't feel like he is very good at doing. He's not as consistent as you think other quarterbacks would be. That so far through the 2 weeks since Cam Newton's been back, that's been the storyline. He's going to be playing this Buffalo Bills defense that is very aggressive. They have a very strong cornerback in Tre'Davious White. However, the defense for Buffalo has given up a lot of big plays this year, but can New England capitalize? Can New England make some of these plays and they're going to have to do it without Julian Edelman. I believe N'Keal Harry is also out of this matchup as well.
Yep.
So who is Cam Newton going to be throwing the football to? This, to me, I think Buffalo is going to take this one. But, yeah, it's kind of concerning to me, though, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a quick shout out from Dylan Sanders at Dilly Sanders on Twitter, who wants to give us a quick howdy. We also had a little question here as well, which has to do with the Buffalo Bills. Somebody asking about better long-term pickup in a PPR league. I know we don't have Vinny Iyer here on today's episode to talk through fantasy, but I would be more than happy to say that Zach Moss is the better pickup because avoid the New York Jets at all costs right now. And then B, I just think that Zach Moss has more long-term payoff as somebody who can be effective in the run game as well as somebody that can catch out of the backfield. So that's one of the reasons why I go with him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great pick. Anything New York Jets would be very risky this year. So
yeah,
buyer beware. Trevor Lawrence may not even want to go back to might not even declare. He might stay another year.
Let me get one more year in at Clemson here before I go back. I think that the Stephon Gilmore storyline is such an interesting one because I feel like we see this every trade deadline. There's some player that gets hurt in practice, and then the speculation becomes, oh, that player's on their way out the door. They're about to get traded. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, no, he actually just was hurt. So we'll see exactly what happens with Stephon Gilmore. But it is an interesting storyline and a bit of a thread to pull and follow.
His house is on the market, though.
Hey, look, I love those. Did he unfollow the Patriots on Twitter by any chance? Or?
I'm going to check after the show, but yeah, it's crazy.
I love those. I love all of that. All right, let's jump over to our next game here. The Tennessee Titans at the Cincinnati Bengals. Tennessee heavy favorites in this one. Tennessee has consistently proved me wrong all season, and I absolutely love it. Cincinnati, you want them to be very good, but that offensive line, they have some trouble over on the defense as well. They've got the quarterback, though, so they at least have the first part of the formula together. Now it's just about and they have the weapons as well. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, those guys have looked fantastic so far for them. And even Gio Bernard is having a little bit of a resurgence. Joe Mixon's been in and out with injuries, but this just feels like Tennessee's game to run away with.
Yeah, it really does, which is crazy because I think we don't attempt to minimize the Cincinnati Bengals here, but the way that they've been playing, I mean, they were in that shootout last week with the Cleveland Browns. They were up on Cleveland for a big part of that game, and then it was just back and forth. I mean, that final 5 minutes of that football game was probably the most entertaining stretch of football I've seen this season. T. Higgins, as you mentioned, out of Clemson, has just risen up. He's been one of the favorite targets of Joe Burrow, which is ironic because they played against each other in the national. But they got that connection there. But here's the thing for me too, and I think it's been the storyline we've talked about all year. One, if Cincinnati, the offensive line has played a little bit better in the last couple of weeks, but if they can address the offensive line, give Joe Burrow time in the pocket, they can make some moves here. I think it makes more sense right now for them to trade John Ross, maybe get some assets to be able to build even further on that football team. But yeah, I think that they're just going to be overpowered by Tennessee. I mean, you got Derrick Henry in front of you running down. It's going to be hard. Even though I think Cincinnati's defense has been stingy this year, they've been, despite the amount of points they've given up, they've played very, very tough. But it's a different animal against A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, Ryan Tannehill, and Derrick Henry. Those guys, they have a game plan that's we're going to control the time of possession, we're going to catch you sleep, and we're going to hit you with the quick pass-off play action, and it's hard to cover. Yeah, absolutely. I think Cincinnati's defense has done some impressive things, but it's a challenge to slow down Derrick Henry. And even though the Pittsburgh Steelers did it last week, it's not the same defense that you're going to be finding in Cincinnati. Let's jump over to the NFC North. The Minnesota Vikings traveling to take on the Green Bay Packers. Packers favored by almost a touchdown, -6 here. Touchdown without the extra point, couple of field goals. I feel like with all the news that we're hearing about Minnesota and the fact that they're willing to trade so many pieces, that this just feels like a team not a team that's ready to lay down by any means. But, when you start developing trade rumors around potentially dealing some of your team, that does create a little bit of concern in the locker room and creates a bit of a narrative there. So, and you're going up against a division rival. And of course, division games are always unpredictable, but Green Bay has just looked very, very good this season, regardless of who's out, as we referenced earlier today. And Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams just had a fantastic game last week. I think they can continue to build on that this week. Yeah, I'm gonna have a beer today from my buddy Luke Braun, host of the Lockdown Vikings podcast. He just it's been rough in Minnesota, and I feel for him because there's times where they've been close in games and they just give it away. Defensively, I think Minnesota has just been so bad this season, and it really started against that Week 1 opener against the Green Bay Packers, where Green Bay came to Minnesota. They just lit them up, and really the score, was as big as it was because Minnesota scored a few garbage time touchdowns.
Right.
But outside of that, they're nowhere close to the level of the Green Bay Packers right now, unfortunately. And, this could be the beginning of a little bit of a fire sale down there in Minnesota defensively for some of their guys as they look to try to rebuild that. But yeah, it's just really odd to see a Mike Zimmer coach team struggle the way that they are on the defensive side of the football. It just kind of seems a little unorthodox to me. But then again, I think when you don't have the personnel to be able to run the man coverage the way they've been able to, it makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah. Let's take a look now at the New York Jets traveling to Kansas City, Arrowhead Stadium, take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City with the college football spread here, favored minus 20. The guys over at Locked On Chiefs, Ryan Tracy and Chris Carter broke this one down. I'm sorry, Chris Clark broke this one down a bit, taking a look at how they could potentially see Kansas City's offense, which is, I guess you could say, back on track. They did have a couple of struggles, a couple of road bumps, but they were looking pretty good here about how they can maintain it against the New York Jets, but not a lot of defense present in New York. There's also some trade rumors for them being willing to deal away certain players like Quinnen Williams, which would be a big loss for them in the run game. I just think that this is another one of those games where Kansas City is favored by this much for a reason. That's for sure.
Well, wasn't it last week where the New York Jets, they played a player they had already traded and he played in a game for them?
Right.
That was, that's just weird. But they're going to Kansas City. It's going to be cold. It's going to be rowdy. Kansas City's back home. They're coming off a 43-16 victory over the Denver Broncos, where offensively, you look at 43-16, you think, oh, yeah, their offense had no problems. No. They scored two offensive touchdowns in this game. They scored one in the first quarter, and they scored one late in that third quarter against Denver. But the other touchdowns came on a pick six and on a kick return touchdown. Denver defensively held Kansas City to 0 for 8 on third down, which was crazy. We haven't seen that. They were able to sack the Chiefs 4 times. We haven't seen that happen. So the Broncos, I think, maybe established a little bit of a formula. But look, New York, they don't have the personnel to be able to replicate that. This is going to be a game where I think it gets out of hand early, and I think Kansas City is going to be at a point where they're sitting pretty. I'm just hoping they hit the under today, Ross.
There you go. That's that's what it's all about. It's what, 40 something, 44, something like that.
So on the one I'm betting on, the under is minus 46.9. So
You should be all right. I could see this being one of those like 28-3, 28-0 type games. Just not a lot going on for the New York Jets right now. And next thing that we'll take a look at before we get to our picks here, we're going to skip these two games because we'll hit those first two games, the Denver game and the New Orleans game in our last thoughts. But we have the San Francisco 49ers up against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Fantastic matchup here for one of the late games. And this is, another divisional game. Seattle favored -3. Seattle took that tough divisional loss already this season. Could they end up taking another with San Francisco getting healthier, looking better, and that NFC West looking really, really competitive?
Yeah, we've been talking all season long about Russell Wilson MVP, and certainly I still think he's got traction there. But the way he played against Arizona, he still played good, but those interceptions came at the most inopportune times. They were killers, and that's exactly what led to them losing. Isaiah Simmons, who has only probably played 8 snaps this season altogether, one of those times he gets an interception, so maybe they're going to play him more down there. But San Francisco's been playing better football as of late, Ross. They've been getting things going with Jimmy Garoppolo offensively, even without Raheem Mostert at the running back position. He went on IR. They're getting guys back. Debo Samuel, I believe. I don't know if I think I heard that he re-aggravated an injury or something like that. Yeah,
he's been dealing with that again.
So he's going to be, more than likely out of this matchup. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett offense. So I think Seattle's going to put up points. This is going to be one of those games where I think it's going to be another close one. I think it's going to come down to the final minutes too. And of course, it's going to be an entertaining one.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun one to watch. I know Brian Peacock, host of Locked On 49ers, was on Twitter this morning talking about, Tevin Coleman might get the start, but JaMychal Hasty is the running back to watch when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers. And the 49ers just proving that you don't have to invest high in running backs. You could still get a ton of production because just about any running back they've had back there, not named Jerick McKinnon, has had some fantastic success for the San Francisco 49ers. So let's go ahead and hit the picks for today as we begin to wrap up today's episode, this week's episode. Remember, we'll be back with you, of course, next Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern time as well to help preview that next slate of games. Let's go ahead and get started with our first pick here. The Los Angeles Rams at the Miami Dolphins. Of course, we have to do it. It's 2 a time in Miami, and this is going to be the Rams favorite on the road here, -3.5. Which way you go here?
I think the Rams are going to enjoy the nice weather in Miami on this one. I think that the defense for Tua, he's going to be they're going to throw a lot of stuff at him. I think defensive coordinator for the Rams, Brandon Staley, I think he's done a really good job this season with them. They've gotten some guys in place. Jalen Ramsey's going to be on Devontae Parker. I think this is going to be a game where the Rams come away with this victory. Yeah,
I think I got to give this one to the Rams too. But I do think that it could turn into a little bit of a shootout. That's how I get my tree fitty. When it comes to Tua, it's how I get it. But no, I think that it's going to be a fun matchup, and I'm very excited to see it. I think we are going to see some magic from Tua in this game. No pun intended towards Ryan Fitzpatrick. But I do think we see some of those things, those flashes that let you know, yeah, he can be. There is a such thing as a successful Alabama quarterback in the NFL, and his name is Tua Tagovailoa. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. But I do think that, look, Sean McVay's back in his bag right now. His play calling has been outstanding, and it's more multiple than we've seen from him in the past. He and Jared Goff just a little bit more comfortable. The creativity of Sean McVay really able to help Jared Goff succeed in this offense. The weapons are there. They're doing fine. I mean, they're looking really, really good. And again, a very competitive NFC West division. Let's get to our next one here. This is a huge game. This is another one that I think could have been flexed to the evening game that we'll talk about here in a moment. But the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. Pittsburgh gets the big win last week against Tennessee, the battle of the undefeateds. They remain undefeated here, 6-0. But Baltimore just with one loss so far, 5-1. This is a tough matchup, and I think it's going to be a bit of a I think we used to call them in the WWF a slobber knocker. Yes. And I think that's exactly what you're going to get here.
Yes. Where's good old JR when you need him, folks? I think, for this one, I got Baltimore. And part of me, I'm a little skeptical now, but I'm going to stick with my pick. Mark Ingram is out of this game. He's not going to be playing here. So for Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, I think it's going to be really on him. I think with the pass rushers that Pittsburgh has, they're really going to try to compress the edge. So when they try to run the read option, I don't think that Lamar Jackson is going to have the ability to go to the outside. However, I do think we might see some more inside. We might see some veer option. We might see a lot of different things where he's going to do that, but they got to get the run game going on the interior. And today's going to be a big day. Can Lamar Jackson hit those passes across the middle? He loves to go to Mark Andrews, but it hasn't been something where they've been very consistent at it. NFL defenses have prepared for it. So this is going to be a big test. But I'm going to have Baltimore coming out here winning. Justin Tucker is going to kick the game-winning field goal, folks. And the Pittsburgh Steelers will be undefeated no more.
There you go. I like it. I'm gonna go with Pittsburgh here. I just think that Pittsburgh defense, the defense has been fantastic. Even without Devin Bush, they've looked really good, and I just have to keep betting on that. I mean, this game feels very much like the Tennessee game that we talked about last week, right? To where Pittsburgh can be sort of a little bit more multiple on offense. They can put more points on the board through the passing game. The Ravens are such an interesting team because they're averaging 29.8 points per game, nearly the 8th team in the NFL this season to average over 30 or more. There's 7 teams averaging 30 or more points per game right now.
Crazy.
However, they're second fewest in the NFL when it comes to passing yards, which in modern day NFL is absolutely wild. Now, they're near the top when it comes to the run game and run yards, but you don't usually see it stack up that way in the NFL these days. So this is very different what we're seeing in terms of them excelling in the run game, not doing so great in the passing game, 177 passing yards per game or thereabouts, but yet they're still top 10 in scoring and nearly 30 points per game. It's absolutely wild, but it really comes down to the run game for them. I think Pittsburgh does very well against the run game on the defensive side, so that's going to help them out. I can't see Baltimore's offense just rejuvenating a passing game against this defense either, and so I'll go with Pittsburgh just because of the fact that they can remain a little bit more multiple over on the offensive side and put up the points that they need to secure this victory.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And then we're going to get to our next game here. San Francisco versus the Seattle Seahawks. It's back in Seattle. The 12th man is going to be loud virtually, but maybe not so realistically in the stadium. I think this is a bounce-back game for the Seattle Seahawks. Like I said, I think it's going to be very close, going to be very competitive, but I don't think that the Seahawks, I don't think Russell Wilson is going to make some of the same mistakes that he did late in the game against Arizona last Sunday. I think he's going to get it right here today.
Yeah, I just have to imagine that Seattle's going to bounce back at home and be ready for these San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan's really fantastic offensive game call.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. But Ross, can we talk about this game? This is the primetime game that we were all treated to. Like, I could do my laundry tonight and probably not miss a beat here. Philadelphia hosting the Dallas Cowboys, and Ben DiNucci, everybody's favorite godson. He's coming to Philadelphia. But here's the deal. Robert De Niro's character in Silver Linings Playbook is taking the parlay bet with his buddy, and it's going to be Philadelphia is going to win, and they're going to hold Ben DiNucci to under 150 yards passing in this game.
I like that. I like the little extra caveat there, man. Look, Philadelphia, this game is so lopsided that Philadelphia is favored 10.5 points. They're favored double digits in this game. And they are going to be at home. Jalen Reagor is coming back as well. That's something I'm really excited to see over on the offensive side. Carson Wentz having a guy that's, not, Travis Fulgham, getting some speed over there. We know how much the, Louis DiBiase as well as Gino Camarelli, those guys that came in and talked to us last week, talked a little bit on their show, Locked on Eagles, beforehand and before the season began, that the three things that they really wanted when it came to the draft and adding folks in this free agency in this offseason, they wanted availability, which they've struggled with a bit so far this season. They wanted speed, and then they wanted reliability as well. And so, that way when they are on the field, you're seeing that production. But speed was definitely a big one. You saw them get Quez Watkins. You saw Khalil Tate show up and transition from quarterback to wide receiver for a little bit. You saw the addition of Jalen Reagor. You saw the addition of Davion, the linebacker, the undersized linebacker that they had, yep. Davion Taylor, who came in from Colorado, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Absolutely great. Yeah. And so, he's somebody that's undersized, so he plays a little bit of that hybrid role, but unfortunately haven't gotten the chance to really see him much so far this season with injury. But I'm really excited to see what Philadelphia looks like when they get all that speed back on the field, when they get that reliability, and that all aligns with the availability. I'll take Philadelphia here as well, but I think up against Dallas, it's kind of a shoo-in. I just don't really see too much. But maybe Ben DiNucci comes out and surprises all of us. We'll see.
I don't know. James Madison guys tend not to do that sometimes in the NFL. We'll see,
true.
though. But Rostradamus on the picks here. Oh, man, this is another – our spreads today are kind of lopsided for some of these teams, just a discrepancy. But like Patricia said, New York's been very competitive in a majority of their games. The fact, if they could hang around with Tampa Bay, I think that just builds promise, though. But it's going to be hard. You're going to see the introduction of Antonio Brown to the mix, and I think Tom Brady, they're going to pass all over the field here. James Bradbury, though, in my opinion, is a player to watch in this game. Whoever he covers at the receiver position, I think he's a very, very damn good, talented cornerback. He's fun to watch, but I just don't think they're going to have enough to be able to kind of keep up with the reinforcements that Tampa Bay has. So I got Tampa in this one.
Yeah, I'll go with Tampa 2, but I think that the one
Tampa 2.
Yeah, Tampa 2. They're going to play it. I think that one of the players to really keep an eye out on over for Tampa Bay's offense, especially with the Chris Godwin injury, is Scotty Miller. Man, I just think that. Look, when Chris Godwin is in the game, I know a lot of people point to Rob Gronkowski taking away targets from Mike Evans, but it's Chris Godwin. Like when Chris Godwin's in the game, Tampa Bay, according to our good friend Marcus Mosher, who does the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast, he talks about how he's like wide receiver 66 or something like that when Mike Evans is when Godwin's in the game. So the production just drops off big time. And so I think that maybe you start to see more targets to him. But I'll be interested to see how much Scotty Miller, who Tom Brady really developed a lot of chemistry with over the offseason, ends up producing here with more opportunities if Chris Godwin, without Chris Godwin.
Scotty doesn't know, baby. That's right there for them down in Tampa Bay. But yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's interesting that you have all its talent, but the distribution when one guy is in comparison to the other, it's just such a discrepancy. So yeah, you always talk about balance. I think balance is great. I mean, the 2013 Denver Broncos had a lot of balance because they had over 4 receiving targets with 10 plus touchdowns. But then Peyton Manning was playing ridiculous football then. But Ross, I kind of wanted to piggyback here before we get off air here. I wanted to touch on the games that we're going to play. And I want to start off with the New Orleans Saints game here today. When you look at this matchup altogether for New Orleans, where they're at, Chicago defensively, Chicago's just one of those weird teams that has, that's over that 5+ win threshold for you in this matchup. How do you see this game going? Because, like I said, you're still going to be without, Michael Thomas in this matchup. What are the expectations here in New Orleans against a team like Chicago?
Run for it, run for it, run. That's what this game has to be. It's got to be a lot of Alvin Kamara. It's got to be a lot of Latavius Murray. It's got to be this offensive line that has performed extremely well in the run game, taking advantage of a lighter second level in Chicago. When you look at the off-ball linebackers that Chicago has, they have a lot of speed. They could beat you to the edge. But if you can get those offensive linemen up to the second level and the zone reads, zone options, or even the power run game, which Saints don't run a ton of, haven't run a ton of this year, but with Latavius Murray, they absolutely can. And the thing that I love about Latavius Murray is 6'3". He falls forward every time he gains you a net. He turns every 3-yard gain into a 5-yard gain by simply falling down. And that's the type of player that it's going to take, that type of smash mouth football. I think in order for you to be a Saints team that's coming in down Michael Thomas, down Emmanuel Sanders, down Marquez Callaway, who was had a bit of a breakout game last game in place of those two guys coming out there catching 8 passes for 75 yards. They're down 3 of their top receiver options. One of them still remains, though, in Traquan Smith, who's going to have to make some tough catches over the middle, which is where this Chicago defense does tend to be weak when it comes to the passing game. So you want to look at over the middle between the line of scrimmage and 20 yards, which really is where the Saints offense in the passing game wants to operate anyway.
Well, I guarantee you this probably won't be your favorite Saints-Bears game in history because I remember the snow game, right? Going back there. It is going to be in Chicago, though. It's not going to be snowing. But, I think that you're right. Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, run the football with these guys effectively. Don't do the Taysom Hill gadget plays if you really got some consistency going. Utilize that once you get into like the red zone. But if you're behind, if you're behind your own 50-yard line or if you're ahead of it, then maybe you can look into it. But that would be my key, especially with guys like Khalil Mack. As we saw a few weeks ago on Thursday Night Football, he hip-tossed Tristan Wirfs like it was nothing with one hand. We talked about slobber knockers. That right there was a WWE play there. But,
that's right.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a fun matchup. And, I got New Orleans winning that. Actually, no, I have Chicago winning that one. I think it's going to be close. I feel for New Orleans this year. I don't think the things have gone the way that they had planned for this season.
No, not at all.
It's been unfortunate. Especially
over on the defensive side. And one of the big things to take a look at is if the Saints can eliminate the big play. We just saw Chicago get their first 40-plus yard play of the season last week against the Los Angeles Rams in a bit of a desperation heap. But the Saints allowing the second most 40-plus yard plays with 6 so far this season, behind only the Seattle Seahawks, who have allowed 7. So those big plays may be able to come to life for Chicago. And the way that the Saints lose this game is by giving Chicago an offense. That's where they get in trouble. So, that's one game to where they're going to be traveling a bit. But Denver, the Broncos, they're going to be hosting the Los Angeles Chargers in another divisional matchup. We've referenced it several times. Divisional matchups tend to be a little bit wacky from time to time. How are you sort of looking at this? Justin Herbert just got his first win. He's going to be coming in with maybe some reinvigorated excitement and momentum to take on Drew Lock and the Denver Broncos. What are you looking at for this one?
Look, Justin Herbert has played really good football since he became a starter. A couple of mistakes that he made, in games, I think against the Kansas City Chiefs and also against Tampa Bay, that led to losses there where they easily could have won those games, and it's a different story. This is a much better team for the Chargers, much better than their 2-4 record indicates altogether. But for the Broncos, I think defensively, they played really well against Kansas City last week. Defensively, they matched up really well with their offensive weapons. Travis Kelce was held to only 31 yards on 3 catches. So that was a nice formula to see for the Broncos defensively. You're going to see A.J. Boye against Keenan Allen. You're going to see Michael Ojemudia against Mike Williams. And then you're going to see the safeties line up against the tight end here. To me, I think the biggest key is going to be for the Broncos. Phillip Lindsay is expected to play. He went through concussion protocol. The Broncos rushed for over 177 yards last week. They had to abandon it late because they were down by 2 scores due to turnovers, 4 turnovers on the offensive side of the ball, and a kick return touchdown that they gave up. Drew Lock, the pressure is on Lock this week. The microscope is big. Justin Herbert's been playing great in the AFC West. Drew Lock, we haven't seen too much of him yet. So for him, this is going to be a big game. If he can bounce back, it's going to be great. If he struggles like he did, he regresses through his mechanics and everything, his progressions and reads like he did last week. If that continues, there's going to be some serious concern about the Broncos quarterback position going forward. So this is going to be a tough one. I look at it also on the standpoint, no Chris Harris Jr., no Desmond King who's been ruled out, and not really sure what that was. That happened yesterday, not injury related. He has been ruled out. So,
he's another one whose name is on the trade block.
Yes, I know. He might be traded at halftime. So the Broncos, I think, have an advantage here. If they could run the football between Melvin Gordon and Philip Lindsay, and they can capitalize in the passing game, I think defensively Denver can get enough stops to be able to make this a game where the Broncos can win this one. I got the Broncos in this one, but it's going to be close. AFC West divisional matchups are always this slobber knocker.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the word of the day for us today is slobber knocker, that's for sure. But that's because we have so many good games this week. Let me get one more thought from you on the Denver Broncos. What's the key for them over on the defensive side to limiting Justin Herbert, or just, operating around Justin Herbert?
I would say it's pressure. This is a kid that can step up. Even when pressure is in his face, he can make throws, but you got to get that pressure home to him. Yeah. He takes shots. He gets right back up. Ross, you saw it on Monday Night Football against him. There were times where that Saints defense, they corralled him. They got pressure in his face. That seems to work a little bit, but he still delivers the football. So it's get your hands up. The Broncos have defensive lineman Shelby Harris, who leads the NFL as a defensive lineman in passes deflected, knocked down at the line of scrimmage. It's getting get those arms up, knock down the passing window that Justin Herbert has. And the Broncos, if they can do that, if they can get to him and maybe play tight contested coverage, I think they'll be okay defensively in this matchup.
Absolutely love it. Always a pleasure. We've done it again, another week down here at Locked On NFL Sunday. We appreciate those of y'all that tuned in with us or that are watching live or watching later, however it is that you're doing it. The show stays up on YouTube as well, at the Locked On Live YouTube page and elsewhere. So thank you very much for taking the time to check us out. Again, I'm Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola, joined as always by Cody Roark every single Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Cody Roark, NFL on Twitter. Cody, always a pleasure to be here with you, buddy.
Always great, my friend. And listeners of the show, if you love NFL action, you feel like your team doesn't get talked about by the national media, that's why we want you guys to come and tune in here every single Sunday. Locked On NFL Sunday, your team every day. Plus the great lineup of Locked On podcasts from all the hosts that you guys hear here. We get you covered every single day with a podcast, short, sweet, to the point, about your favorite team when you want it.